Hi guys, welcome back to the next episode of my NHL Deep Dive series. Today we're talking about the Colorado Avalanche, and Colorado's kind of an interesting team because they had the Stanley Cup a couple years ago, and immediately after that, like everybody, including myself, was like, this team has dynasty written all over it. Like they're a team that's going to be contending for a Stanley Cup every single year, and that really hasn't happened. They've been like obviously they've been really good. They've still been in that kind of group, but they haven't been as dominant as maybe we all thought they would have been after the first win. And it's led to, I mean, part of that is the fact that like Gabriel Landeskog's been out pretty much ever since then. But it's definitely led to Colorado being in this kind of interesting situation where they have a really strong team, but it brings up like the question, is it still good enough to contend? Like we thought this team was going to have like this crazy, like easily the best blue line in the NHL. And it's still very good. Obviously, I mean, they're a top five team on my rankings right now. Same with offensively, right? Like this team really has lost a lot of its depth from that run, and they haven't been able to replace it either. So this was kind of an interesting offseason for them because they really focused on depth, and I wasn't sure how to rank a lot of this. So it's gonna take a bit of nuance to kind of go over their offseason moves. Offensively, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, they add Parker Kelly and Matthew Phillips. They lose Parise, Cogliano, Yakov Trenin, and Duhaime. And Trenin's definitely the best player of that group, but like none of them are truly like super impactful players. So like I couldn't really say anything else than no change because the core like essence of this team is the same as it was. So it was I couldn't really say anything else than no change, even though they obviously lost four players and they only added two. And I think Trenton's the best player of that group. It really wasn't a ton of like shift in how good this team is going to be this season. Defensively, it's a similar story. I mean, I said they're slightly upgraded, and they bring in DeHaan, they bring in McDonald, Brandstrom, Rosen, and Shillington. They lose Sean Walker, who's again the best player of that group. Jones and Jack Johnson. But I think like DeHaan, Brandstrom, and Shillington together as a three can make up what they lost in Jones and Walker like enough, and it gives them some injury insurance as well. So like again, like there was like it's not a ton of change, but I think it's slightly upgraded just on the fact that they're bringing in like quantity, and for a blue line whose top four is very solid, I feel like that's kind of like going to be okay. And obviously, they didn't make any changes in net, so it it's kind of set them up in an interesting scenario. And offensively, they ranked number 9 in the NHL. And we're going to talk about Valeri Nichushkin in a second because I have him ranked in this group. But I mean, first of all, I mean, McKinnon is obviously going to be, an MVP candidate every season. He is one of the best centers in the NHL. He's one of the best players in general in the NHL. And same with Mikko Rantanen. I feel like Mikko Rantanen doesn't get a lot of the hype on this offense. But again, when you rank your top wingers in the league, Mikko Rantanen is at or near the top of that list, depending on who you ask. And he's consistently been like, as far as star players go, he might be the most underrated like star player in the NHL. Um, and yeah, I've been a huge fan of his game pretty much forever, and especially even without Landeskog, like he's been able to continue being one of the best wingers in hockey. So uh Mikko Rantanen, I mean, his point totals are there, his underlying numbers are there. Um he's definitely like in that top tier of NHL players. Valeri Nichushkin's the interesting player here because this is what I mean with this team when they kind of lack depth, and it's almost like they're Colorado's in a situation where their top stars are good enough that he can kind of like elevate them. It's very Toronto-esque, where I feel like they lack that secondary scoring that they had even a couple of years ago, like when they did go on that cup run, and obviously Nazem Kadri really helped with that. But um, Blair Nichushkin's the interesting one because the all those stories have said that he's coming back. Um, all it's that's the reports. We don't know when. There's no real timeline for it, but I had to put him in here because he is going to play this season apparently. So he did affect their rating in that sense. And other than that, I mean, like Arturi Lekkonen's really good. I'm a huge Arturi Lekkinen fan. I have been forever. Just a very versatile jack of all trades kind of player, kind of similar in a Valerian Nichushkin kind of vein. Just maybe not as good, but still a very useful top six forward at this point. But then it's just a bunch of guys who kind of need to prove themselves. I mean, Casey Middlestat post trade looked like he was going to be able to be this team's second line center, but even then, like you look at the other second line, look at the other like top six centers that we've talked about so far in the series, and is obviously McKinnon's like good enough to do that, but is Casey Middlestat like does he line up well with some of the other teams in this area? Like I don't know. And then Jonathan Drouin, who had a strong season last year for what he was asked to do, but he's going to have to do that again, and he's going to have to improve on it. So, overall, this top six has obviously they have potential to be very good with the two A plus players and the depth that's there, especially if Nichushkin can come back and be the same kind of player. And there's been stories about Landeskog maybe playing this season, but who knows? I mean, we haven't seen him play for 2 years. We don't know what he has to give right now either. So, like, you look at this team, and in theory, the top six should be very good. But there's a lot of questions about it, right? And obviously, if they get Landeskog back and he slots into the top six, you can move somebody down. You're probably moving Lehkonen down to the third line, and that really does help the overall shape of this forward core, assuming that Landeskog comes back good and can play in the top six still. And then you have Nichushkin, who like whenever he comes back, he's gonna be an impact player most likely, and hopefully he can get back to what he was on the ice. So, but it's a lot of questions about a team that doesn't. I want to put this the right way. It doesn't have as much stability behind them as they have in the past. You look at the other players on this team. I mean, Miles Wood's got that insane contract, but he's a fine third liner. I don't have a problem with him at all. I mean, Ross Colton I really like as a 3C. Um, and Logan O'Connor, somebody that like I have a post on Logan O'Connor. Like I'm a huge fan of him as a bottom six forward. I think he's super useful. So like as a third line, like that's a solid third line, but it would be better if they could slide like Lehkonen down to it and move Miles Wood to the fourth line, right? Then all of a sudden you really have this well-rounded group. And then obviously on the bottom end, you have Parker Kelly and Joel Kiviranta who are there, and then Liam John-Luc Foudy is kind of the player that stands out to me as the wild card on this team. And we've talked about the young kids on the last couple teams, and Foudy is the kind of the question for me. If he can come in and be a full-time NHLer and crack this roster, then that should really help their depth. If he can't do that, the question becomes like who's here supporting the rest of this group. So as a fourth line, I have concerns. Like Parker Kelly's fine. Joel Kiviranta has been fine. But if Jean-Luc Foudy can step in and be a very solid fourth line center, then it does elevate that line's potential. And again, on paper, like if everybody's here fully healthy, I think this core is it's got a lot of potential. But the big quiz questions are when does Nichushkin come back? Because Nichushkin not playing to start the season kind of slides everybody else up, and I don't think this team has the depth to be able to slide like their third liners up. Um, and then when does Landeskog play? Right, like does he play at all? Does he play in January? Does he play in the playoffs? Like we don't know. So that's kind of the big thing. If they can slide guys down this lineup, then it becomes extremely strong. But if they have to move guys up, like this team doesn't have a ton of injury protection, is what I'm trying to put, is the way I'm trying to put this. Like I think fully healthy, Colorado's got the top 10 offense pretty easily. Um, but it's just nobody stays fully healthy the whole year. And that's kind of my biggest concern with that group. Jumping into the blue line, I have them ranked fourth, and it's very close. Like the top four are all extremely close for me. But I mean, Cale Makar is arguably the best defenseman in the NHL. I know I said the same thing with Quinn Hughes. I think they're kind of like 1A, 1B right now. So maybe this year Makar kind of retakes the crown for himself. And Devon Toews is another guy who we'll see if the aging curve hits him, even starting this season. But he's still like a really good number one defenseman. I think he's going to have a shot at Team Canada's uh whatever it's called, the four nations face off or whatever. Um, he should have a chance at that team, especially because Makar is going to be on it and they have chemistry together. It makes sense, but even just on his own, Devontae is one of the best Canadian defensemen in the NHL, so uh, he should have a shot to make that roster. The rest of the team, I mean, Sam Girard's there and Josh Manson, who are a pretty solid second pair. And you have DeHaan and Brandstrom, who I have penciled in as their third pair. And I think that's the best combination they can do. I think if they can get Oliver Shillington to get back to the level he was at the start of the year, like 2 years ago, that would be super helpful. But he really fell off a cliff since then. So overall, like I think it's a strong blue line. Obviously, I mean it's led by Cale Makar, who just rocks, and Devon Taves is a great second option. I mean he could be a first option on a lot of teams. But again, it's health, right? Like is Sam Girard, is he going to be, like, is he going to be good to go? Josh Manson is somebody who might be hit by the aging curve a little bit this year, and then DeHaan and Brandstrom, if they can get Brandstrom to be the 70% of the player that he was supposed to be out of the draft, that's a really strong third pair guy, right? Like if they can kind of mold him into being kind of what Bowen Byram was for this team. Obviously not to the same potential level, but to the same kind of like what he did with this team, contribute like contribution wise, that would be really impactful for this team too. So they have Brancham there. Like I think Brancham and Foodie are kind of the two big X factors on this team, that could really elevate Colorado to the next level. And I mean, Kevin DeHaan's somebody that I just like as a third pair defenseman. He just kind of fits that role pretty well. Again, there's no holes on this defense. Whereas I think the forward core kind of has that, depth issue in case of injury. There's no real safety net. Defensively, obviously, I mean, you can't replace somebody like Cale Makar if he gets hurt, but overall, like I think it's still a strong unit. It just has to play differently, if they have an injury, but they should be fine uh, that way. I think they just have to change up how they play, but I don't think that the quality of the level of quality should necessarily dip. And finally in net, I mean, it's anyone looked solid as a backup. Alexander Gorgiev's here. It's 22nd for me. It's tied with the Leafs actually. Um, and I don't have as many concerns about this team because Gorgiev has proven that he can just be good enough to get this team like where they need to be. But again, it's just like if they can survive the the season, and they should be able to. I mean, it's not going to be there's not you're not going to be asking these goaltenders to do a crazy amount of workload because I mean the blue line's a top 5 blue line. They have a top 10 offense. They should be fine in terms of like not getting shelled. Um, they just need stable goaltending, right? They need both these guys to be, have their goals saved above expected and, that's the decent, relative range. If both these, if, Gorgiev can end up being like a mid teens uh goal saved above expected goalie, then that's good enough, right? Like they don't need him to, be a Connor Hellebuck or an Igor Shesterkin. They don't need that from him necessarily. So if they can just get solid goaltending, competent goaltending, uh, this unit should be fine. That it's not really a concern for me, despite the fact that they're ranked 22nd. I think you're just kind of hoping for good enough, and with the way that the rest of this roster is built, that should be fine. I mean, they won a Stanley Cup with good enough goaltending, so it's clearly possible. But yeah, overall, like this is a team that's going to be in the contention for the Central. Obviously, they're the highest ranked Central team that I have. Um, and if you notice, the last 4 teams on my list are all from the same conference. Um, so so there's that. But yeah, I mean they're my number one. I want to make sure I'm right on that. Yeah, they're my number one ranked Western Conference team going into the season, and just slightly, like ever so slightly above Dallas. There's like a less than 1 point difference between like the last 4 teams that I've talked about, like Edmonton, Dallas, Toronto, and Colorado. I think the worst. I think Edmonton was at like 171.2 points when you add up all their numbers, and Colorado is at like 172.4 or something. So like it's super close between those 4 teams, but I have Colorado just slightly edging them out. And of course, that's assuming that Valerian Chushin's on the roster. So take that with what you will, in terms of the grades. But yeah, overall, I mean, Colorado's gonna be a team that we're gonna be talking about being in that Stanley Cup bubble. They're gonna be, one of the 4 or 5 contenders in the West for sure. It's just a matter of can it all come together again? And if this team can kind of get all their pieces together, if they can have a healthy season, then yeah, I mean, if Colorado's sitting there at the end, sitting in the Stanley Cup final, it wouldn't shock me. And I don't think anybody else would be that shocked either. But yeah, thank you for watching. And if you like the video, leave a like. Let me know what you think of the Colorado Avalanche down below. Let me know what your Western predictions are. Again, these are not my predictions. This is just my rankings. It's like the power rankings going into the season, basically. Um, yeah, my actual predictions will be posted on October 4th on my Instagram. So go follow my Instagram. It's linked down below. And yeah, thank you for watching. And make sure you subscribe. And we'll see you for the final 4, which are all from the East, 3 from the Metro. So there you go. Uh, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.